For a while now, I have moaned about the sorry state of smartphone photography. Most modern flagship phones are more powerful than a computer from only a few years ago, and yet all of that power seems to go into making the most clinical and boring photograph. iPhone's cameras are particularly bad at creating an interesting photo, but even Samsung and Google have gone the route of crazy dynamic range at the expense of any shadows, creating very flat photos that capture the scene differently to how your eyes saw it. If the 2000s and 2010s were categorized by digicam photos with harsh direct flashes and underexposure, the 2020s are going to be the decade of every single photograph looking more or less like this. A lot of folks have instead moved to shooting film, or more surprisingly, to using all digital cameras. But what if there was another route? Inspired by Snappiness, a great channel, let's use some old phones that not only capture a completely different vibe, but dare I say, actually do a better job than the phone in your pocket. Seriously, stick around, the results are shocking. Let me talk Motorola first. I owned the Moto X-Play back when I was 15. Back when megapixels mattered in phones, the Sony IMX sensor in the style and play was revolutionary, as it used a 2.4-inch sensor, a large sensor for the time, and shot at a whopping 21 megapixels, when competitors were using a 16 megapixel sensor. And I had upgraded from the Galaxy S4 Mini, which only used an 8 megapixel sensor, so this was really a big deal for me. But what was more interesting about the camera was Motorola's picture processing. It's arguably horrendous compared to modern phones, having a very green tint and dark and gloomy output. The former didn't bother me when I owned the Play, and the latter is why I loved the camera back then. It arguably feels like the anti-modern smartphone camera, as it processes the images to opposite how an iPhone does nowadays. And you know what's utterly hilarious? The camera actually resolves more detail than the iPhone, I kid you not. We have large sensors now with pixel binning, and yet the proof is in the pudding. Mind you, that could also just be Apple's processing to blame, especially since Apple's processing adds AI smoothing, while the Motorola has a natural looking image output. But let me quickly move away from the Moto to talk about the Samsung. The Galaxy S7 out of the box didn't shoot great pictures, which you can thank Samsung for, as up until quite recently, maybe the last 4 or 5 years, they have been heavily reliant on hideous over-sharpening to try and resolve as much detail as they could out of the sensor. You could make the joke that they were ahead of the curve, since there are still phones and action cams out there that shoot similar garbage looking photos and videos. Even when I owned the S7 back in 2017, I was not happy at all with the image processing, so I did what any nerd did back in the 2010s. I looked to XDA for a solution, and that solution was Gcam, which was a popular modification that took the Google Pixel camera app, processing and all, and ported it over to various smartphones. And luckily, the European Exynos S7 was one of those phones. Now, I'm not sure how close this processing is to the original Pixel, since it seems like each phone would handle Google camera processing differently, but the output that the S7 spat out specifically is nothing short of gorgeous. Even before I do any side-by-side comparisons between it, the Moto and the iPhone, just look at the pictures I took on various holidays back in the day. The photos are genuinely perfect. Beautiful color rendition with punchy but not over-the-top saturation. Well, usually. There's high dynamic range while still keeping shadows. There's natural sharpness. These photos do not require any tweaking. The Galaxy's Gcam app straight up shoots perfect photos 90% of the time. This incredible work can of course be attributed to Mark Lavoie, as he created the HDR Plus post-processing stack for Google all the way back in the Nexus days. This is exactly why Google was able to use old and outdated camera sensors in the Pixel phones, because the processing made the photos look incredible. And it's no surprise that Pixel's post-processing pipeline has gotten worse once he left to work at Adobe. More on that in my video on Project Indigo. Even my Pixel 6 Pro had great color rendition, although excessive sharpening did start to creep up by then, but I digress. So as I let this comparison slideshow run, yes, the Motorola's green tint is jarring. The iPhone really looks far better than you'd expect, and that is because I created my own custom photographic style to add some color and shadows back into the pictures. You can also see that the iPhone understandably has much better depth of field due to its larger sensor. On a final note, Does this mean that I should carry around an old smartphone to take pictures with? Well, no. The S7 was groundbreaking with its night photos due to the fancy ISO cell sensor. However, it was never as good with Gcam, and even on the stock camera app, it got the job done, memories had been captured. But that is one key area modern smartphones are a million times better. Likewise with video recording, which I didn't bother to test for this video, but I know for a fact it won't beat a modern iPhone. But if you want a break from the same old, why not get an old phone out of your drawer? Or better yet, if you have money burning a hole in your wallet, why not buy a Nokia Lumia? Yes, as a send-off to this video, I'm going to shout out Snappiness again. Go check out his video where he tests an old iPhone and the best smartphone camera of the time, the Nokia Lumia 1020. That's all from me, but please subscribe to stick around to see a retrospective review of the Galaxy S7, which will be the next video.